Hey friends, it's Jasmine, and I hope that you all have been doing well. If you're new to my channel, welcome, and if you are a returning subscriber, hey, it's good to see you back. I am a witchy content creator here on YouTube and several other platforms as well, so if you'd like to follow me elsewhere, feel free to check out all of my links down below. My Instagram would be the best place to personally message me and get a hold of me. Today's video is going to be a little different and almost kind of a little bit awkward for me. This is something that's deeply personal to my practice right now, and it's also something that is going to ultimately end up sort of changing my content a little bit here on YouTube. And I want to talk with you guys about this because, like I said, it is going to change some of the things that I'm doing content-wise, and I just want to share this whole process with you all, and also kind of explain to how I got here. And I already know that this is going to be such a pain to edit because it's just, I already feel awkward in a way, kind of like filming this and sharing this. And parts of this are also kind of sacred and shrouded and wrapped in fourth power. And so I have to be careful about how I word certain things in regards to this because some of it is very private. Many of you know I decided to start my second year of the RTA, which would be the Red Thread Academy, which is like an online American folkloric witchcraft school. And the first year was very rewarding and I really, really enjoyed it. And so I've decided to start the second year now that I've finished my first year. The first year was very much about building foundations. So some of that, was a bit of a revisit, but very valuable revisiting and recircling back to some of those basics and just learning more about American folkloric witchcraft. And this whole tradition has been really enriching for my practice. So if anyone who's interested, no, I'm not sponsored to say any of this, and no, I don't benefit in any way by you checking out the academy. I just, as always, am sharing things that are going on in my practice and things that are positive and influential and impactful. So I don't make any money. I'm not sponsored. Check out the academy if you want to check it out, if it sounds like something that you might be interested in. As I've mentioned, I'm getting ready to start my second year, which kind of builds on those foundations put into place in the first year. And one of the unique things about the second year is picking what is called a specialty. So there's a list of specialties to kind of choose from. It very much gives me the vibes of having a major and a minor, in a proper college. It's kind of exciting. There's the main meat of the coursework, but then that main meat of the coursework is kind of sculpted by what specialty you choose. And you can kind of leave it up to the fates, as I like to call it, where you kind of draw it out of a cauldron, or you seek wise counsel from a spirit to assign a specialty to you, or you can just pick one. And for those of you who might not know, I am a Libra sun, and so having multiple choices given to me can be really difficult because I tend to just kind of fawn and freeze when I'm given multiple choices, and I can be very, very indecisive. I wanted to start my year 2 around my birthday, which is the end of September, because that is when I started my year 1, and the course is kind of designed to take a full year and a day, or longer if you choose it to be. So I wanted to start it around the same time I started my first year. I got the second year book, however, though, a few weeks early, just so I would be ready and prepared. And so I sat on making this decision for a few weeks. It's not a decision that I came to easily, picking my specialty for year 2. It's something I really wanted to give the time to really think about what would be most beneficial for me. So one of them initially did really jump out to me right out of the list, but I questioned if that would be not pushing me out of my comfort zone enough. I mean, the goal is here to be learning and to be growing and to be challenged. And so I didn't necessarily just want to take the one that instantly jumped out to me initially. And so I did some divination on it, communicated with my spirits, and was given the same thing that initially jumped out to me. And so I wanted to sit on it some more and just kind of think about it some more, because I don't know, is it FOMO, like fear of missing out, of like picking the wrong specialty? I don't know. I did kind of skim through a little bit of the book, kind of looking ahead to see, okay, if I pick this specialty, how is that going to influence my experience with this coursework? And really, I think all of the specialties are really important. And I think I would like to spend a year with all of them, maybe eventually. Because I do think that focusing on the specialties that are listed is enriching and powerful. But I don't know, it's just making that first step, right? I don't know if anyone else, but like, I don't know, just being given multiple choices is stressful, and it made my Libra brain just kind of explode for a minute. And so I spent almost about half a month sitting on this. And ultimately, it has taken me to selecting the specialty of Votary, which is kind of like classic clergy, priestess kind of vibes, in service to a specific god or spirit. And that is something that I have felt so to my core of my being. And it's kind of a role that I've already been working with and fulfilling even before I came into the RTA, because I've been leading like a local neo-tradition here before I even got into the Red Thread Academy. So, you know, holding esbats, sabbats, doing sort of community related work during open rituals, helping run and lead our local neo-traditional coven here. Like, those are all things that I've kind of been doing. I consider myself a devotee of the Dark Mother, the Dark Goddess. I've made some videos about my path as a priestess here on YouTube with working with the Dark Goddess. But my work with the Votary is going to be a little different, where I have to be careful about how I talk about this, because it does involve some things that are fourth power, and it does involve some things that are initiatory related. At the end of the course, you have an option to do like a self-initiation ritual. And I ended up doing that. And that self-initiation ritual essentially kind of led me to, or I should say back to Aradia. Aradia is kind of a controversial figure within modern craft. People feel very either way about the Gospel of Witches, which Aradia is really featured in primarily, and then also the folklorist Charles Leland. There is quite a bit of controversy around just all of that. So that kind of like makes for interesting space to navigate through. Working as a votary, making formularies to spirits, like certain oils or incense blends, or facilitating holy days or sacred rites in the name of the divine, that is not necessarily in general unfamiliar territory for me because of the work that I've been doing locally now. But working with Aradia in this capacity will definitely be some new territory. My journey with Aradia, I would say, really probably started close to about a decade ago when I was working at a local metaphysical store, and we had a clearance table at this metaphysical store. And so oftentimes I would just kind of scour the clearance table, because at that time I was, in my early 20s, I was kind of trying to get on my feet, but I had lots of things that I still wanted for myself. I was very like champagne taste on beer budget, as they say. So I loved a clearance rack, and I still do. Like, shopping the sale and the clearance first is something that I still instinctually do. Well, on the clearance rack, I found this gorgeous like wood carved statue of this image of this powerful witchy woman, and on this gorgeous plaque. And, you know, a lot of times things that were on the clearance were things that were damaged. And this statue had a very small chip in it. And so that's why it was clearanced out. There really wasn't anything else wrong with it. And it was still a very pretty statue. So I ended up getting it. And my coworker who was checking me out, giving me my employee discount on top of it already being clearanced. Hello. Oh, so like, you know, are you feeling called to Aradia? And me being the young witch I was at the time, really didn't even know who Aradia was. I just know that I felt called to her statue and that it resonated with me. Right? It resonates. I don't know. It called me. However that works. And maybe some of you can relate to that, where you've been in a metaphysical store before and something just kind of pulls to your attention and grabs your attention or calls out to you. And at the time, maybe you don't really know like why, but like over time, things are revealed. That's very much how my journey with Aradia has been. And I feel like she has kind of waxed and waned in my life since then. Aradia in sort of Italian folklore, the Gospel of Witches, also Magdalena's Vangelo, is pretty much known as the Queen of Witches. So Aradia is known as a sort of folkloric witchy queen, and there's a lot of differing thoughts on her after that. Even some of our influential modern witches, such as Raven Grimassi, has some interesting hot takes about the Italian witch queen. But essentially, Aradia is the daughter of Diana and Lucifer. It's giving very much the chilling adventures of Sabrina. It's giving very much her father is, you know, this big bad, and her mother is the Queen of Night, if you will. There's a lot more to it, but essentially she is their child who is sent down to the earth almost to act as like a witchy sort of prophetess or messiah. And the story in the gospel details her sort of teaching the peasant folk the art of witchcraft to liberate themselves from their wealthy, Catholic, oppressive lords of the time. The Gospel of Aradia, its original version, by Charles Leland, that allegedly was translated by Magdalena's Vangelo, which Magdalena gave to him. You can get a free PDF of this online. It is in public domain because it's that old. So if you're interested in taking a look at the Gospel of Witches for yourself and reading it, feel free. It definitely is not, I would say, a relaxing, quick, or easy kind of read. I've had a couple copies of the Gospel of Aradia. One I have sitting actually right here. This red version, I believe, is available on Amazon. And one of the reasons I got it is because not only is it just the Gospel of Witches, but it also has annotations by some fairly influential modern witches, such as Lori Bruno, Patricia Piana, Jamal Di Fiosa, Raven Grimassi, Mike Howard, Paul Hewson, Judica Isles, Andrew Theodik, Christopher Penzak, Donald Weiser, and more. Kind of enjoy looking at grimoires that have annotations because reading some of these older grimoires can be very dry, and sometimes I have to read things like multiple times to be able to retain the information. I know that for myself, I've owned a copy of the Gospel of Aradia shortly after I got the statue, and then I later got this copy that was recommended to me by another practitioner. So those are the two copies that I've had. I've read the Gospel of Aradia several times in this span. However, recently I went through the Gospel of Aradia and kind of made some of my own personal annotations. If you are on the Patreon, then you have access to looking at that and seeing what I think about some of this. And it's a working document. It's definitely not like completed. I have gone through all of it. And so you will see in the document, like the highlighted sections are kind of my notes about the Gospel of Witches, but I also do have some questions still that pertain to the Gospel. So I'll probably go back once I do some more research to kind of answer the questions I have for myself in regards to the Gospel of Witches and Madalena and Charles Leland. But taking this back to the Red Thread Academy, Votary is going to be my specialty that I am picking. So I will continue doing the coursework, but I will also be doing additional work through the lens of a votary of Aradia. So, like, what does that look like? What does that mean? Aradia is one that really doesn't have a whole ton of ancient literature. We have this folkloric sort of story of Aradia from the Vangelo translated into the Gospel of Witches, and we have that bit. And then we do have some of Raven Grimassi's work where he kind of details Aradia potentially as a real woman in the flesh, Aradia di Tuscanato, I think. And so there's that account. Then there's also some people that tie Aradia to Herodias of the New Testament, the mother of Salome, those two women who are responsible for the beheading of John the Baptist. Now, Charles Leland himself and many other people say that that claim is not really founded, that they wouldn't say that Aradia of the Gospel is the same Aradia of the New Testament. Really, I think where I'm going to be approaching this work from, and really what I think is the most important thing to highlight, is like, I am a modern witch practicing and living in today. And I feel like the Gospel of Witches and Aradia, whether she was Aradia di Tuscanato or whether she was Herodias or whether she is just Aradia of the Gospel, whether she was incarnated physically in the flesh and worked as some type of prophet, suggesting this, witchy lineage, I don't know if that really matters to me on how true or false I think it is, because I don't really feel like works like the Gospel are meant to be historical accounts. And I think that folklore can very much sculpt and shape our practice without it necessarily having to be like literal. And that's also how I feel about a lot of sacred texts and holy books. I'm not what I would consider a fundamentalist whatsoever. I mean, I feel this way in regards to the Quran or the Bible. Like, I don't at all think that those are historical accounts. I think that they're fantastical tales, and some of them, there can be some really powerful lessons pulled from them, but I don't agree that like it happened literally and exactly as it's listed in those books. And so similarly with works of folklore and like the Gospel of Witches, I find it just kind of pointless, in my opinion, to really focus on the historical details of it all. I don't think that looking at it through a historical lens and through a scholarly approach is a bad thing. Angela's Symposium did a really, really good sort of deep dive, not only just into Aradia, but also into Italian folk magic period. So I will leave some links down below in the description if I can remember, detailing that. She did an incredible job. And like I said, I don't want to necessarily like discredit historical aspects of this work, but that's just not so much where I'm going to be coming from when I am doing my work as a votary. So part of that work might look like making incense or making blessed waters, or sort of recreating practices from the gospel, such as the consecration of the meal, which is very similar to how Wiccans have their cakes and ale and trad witches have their hoozle or their red meal. The consecration of the meal is very, very similar to that. Also, the charge of the goddess, like with Doreen Valiente's work and this, is so connected. I think a lot of modern craft, whether it be Doreen Valiente or Gerald Gardner, Raven Grimassi, like I think that there's a lot of modern influence from this text. Even if it's not necessarily a correct depiction of this ancient witch cult. Margaret Murray's thesis that there's an unbroken lineage going back to the cults of Isis to modern day of this initiatory order. And a lot of that people kind of not putting a lot of weight in. I think the fantasy of all of that is really fun. And I think that the idea of this lineage and archetype is enriching to engage in. I don't think it has to be translated as like this is literal truth and like history to pull power from it. I also am going to be putting together some festivals and feast days inspired by the Gospel of Witches, which I think is going to be kind of like a fun challenge considering Diana. There's plenty to pull from. Lucifer, really not as much. Aradia, like next to nothing. So some of this is going to be coming from a modern witch's personal practice. I am not going to be a historian with any of this work. I might take inspiration from history and from folklore, but please in no way think that I am some credible source or educational source for Italian folk magic. I am going to be taking my own interpretation from the Gospel of Witches and creating tools and holidays and ritual supplies, like I said, incense or holy waters, and compiling some of this together. Now, maybe some of that might turn into a grimoire. Maybe it won't. I've been sharing some stuff over on my Patreon, but I'm also trying to not like jump the gun on a whole other manuscript when I'm currently working on extending the Liber Spiritus from my recently published book, Ambrosia's Book of Witchflight. So yeah, there's just like a lot going on. And I wanted to share that because likely at least once a month for the full moons, I'm going to be trying to do a live stream where I do somewhat of like a Aradian service, if you will. So this might kind of spill into the otherworldly pact matchings or the demonic pact matching streams that I have really enjoyed doing with you guys. And I know that they have seem to be very well received. So I don't plan on not doing those, but I also need to incorporate the full moons with my work as a votary for Aradia. So I was kind of considering maybe doing collective readings with my Aradian Oracle by Stacy DeMarco, which is a gorgeous deck. It's the deck. And aside from doing those Oracle collective readings, I think I'm also going to be putting together some spellcraft inspired from the Gospel, also using lunar phases. So like Aradian inspired waxing moon spells, full moon spells, waning moon spells, and taking inspiration like actually from the Gospel. So for example, in the Gospel, there is one part which is about a red goblin, which is associated with basically a hagstone, and using a hagstone actually as a spirit vessel for your red goblin. Another one is like a red bag that basically holds blessed salts and protective herbs that a priestess of Aradia would absolutely be having in their sort of tools. So I'm excited to see really where this takes me. And another thing that really has resonated for me is the horned moon is a symbol that myself and our coven heavily associate our collective work with and our spirits with. And you'll see me wearing a horned moon around my neck. You'll see us adorning horned moons as like witch marks in some of our rituals that we share. And the amount of horned moon symbolism that there is with Aradia, but of course Diana as well, I think is like very confirmational for me. And it's led me down exploring Diana more and her different epithets. Like Diana Lucifera, for example. So you can expect to see a lot more content in regards to Aradia here on my channel. And I'm not exactly sure yet, like what my priestess work is going to look like as I'm just starting it with her. But I do feel like taking a similar blueprint that I have used for just being a devotee of the dark goddess and creating rituals and holidays and tools and formularies would be a good system to apply to kind of working as a votary to any spirit or deity. I also don't feel like this changes my relationship with the Dark Mother whatsoever. And in fact, I feel like it might actually enhance my relationship with the Dark Mother, as the archetype of Diana in the Gospel of the Witches is very much a dark goddess, is very much a Dark Mother figure. And Aradia is kind of like a white goddess figure in a way. If you're familiar with that sort of two faces of the great goddess, or light half of the year goddess, dark half of the year goddess, like if you're familiar with that, I feel like Diana and Aradia as a mother-daughter duo very much play on those archetypes very well. So I think that this is not going to pull me from my devotional work with the Dark Mother whatsoever, because I think that this is inherently connected to that current, and I'm looking forward to exploring that more as well. For myself, another kind of aha confirmational aspect of all of this was when I was reading the Gospel again, and I don't know how I had missed this the few times I've read the Gospel in the past, but this text is very much a book that, like, every time you read it, I really do think that you're going to pull something new from it. It's kind of one of those works. And one of the things that we have been doing in our local neo tradition is making crescent cakes. So essentially like little crescent shaped cookies that I dye with red food coloring to kind of nod subtly at the red meal. And these would be eaten at the end of ritual as kind of like a cakes and ale hoozle grounding bit. And, you know, here we are thinking that we're so creative, so unique, you know, building our own traditions. And then in the Gospel of Aradia, it talks about the crescent cakes and pretty much details these moon-shaped cookies very similar to mine and how I've been making them. So that was definitely kind of another confirmation for me that what I am doing is the right thing for me and that I am on the right path. And I would be lying if I said that working as a votary of such a controversial archetype of Aradia, like, it does make me a little nervous. I know I might kind of come off and seem very adversarial, and I think, like, in nature in some ways, like, I am, but I'm still nervous about it, and I'm still, like, I don't know, there's so much controversy surrounding this, and I just want to be very clear that in my work, I am not representing myself as a folklorist or as a historian. I am coming at this as a modern witch looking to build modern practice influenced by the Vangelo, the Gospel of Witches. So if you're interested in that, wonderful. I'm excited to have you along for the ride. If that's not really your cup of tea, I'm still going to be posting other content as well, but this is going to be a very big, like, underlying theme, at least for my YouTube channel for the next year. I don't know if I'm going to continue my votary work, like, moving forward. I'm at least dedicating to 1 year though, for sure, of like studied votary work and producing work for others as a way to build connections to this deity as well. And I feel like, you know, for us as witches, for those who feel the call to do so, I think contributing to the craft through works of personal gnosis is really going to be what helps build the craft moving forward. You know, I think about what's going to happen in like 50 years or 100 years or 250 years. Are witches of the future, are they going to be able to watch this video? Are they going to be seeing this video? Are they going to be looking back at what we did now as gospel? I mean, there's many witches now that look back to the witches of even just 50 years ago and practice what they did verbatim out of a book. And I don't necessarily think that's healthy. I think that we can take inspiration from, but I think that if we're not kind of mixing our own blood in the cauldron, then I think we're kind of missing out. But I do think about that, right? Like, how is what I'm doing influencing the wider collective spirit of the craft moving forward? And I'm not saying that as in like, you know, I'm this grand high whatever who is responsible for that. I'm not saying that at all. I think that we all are pouring into the spirit of craft. And just as it has poured into us, I think that we return that pour back into the collective spirit of witchcraft, because it has survived before us and will continue to survive after us. And it is within us, and we are therefore also within it, right? So I don't know. Anyways, I have rambled long enough. This is, I already know, going to be like such a pain to edit. Thank you so much if you've made it all the way to the end of this video for sticking around. And yeah, until next time, blessed be, and I will see you in hell.